As a result of the Doolittle Raid and the Battle of the Coral Sea, the United States made it clear to Japan that they would not easily submit to aggression. Japan then developed a plan to extend their eastern wall of defense, while at the same time destroying the U.S. carriers missed at Pearl Harbor. By mid-May 1942, U.S. Admiral Chester W. Nimitz, commander of the Pacific Fleet, had all the intelligence reports he needed to convince him that a Japanese attack on Midway Island was imminent. He issued an order for his ships to assemble in Pearl Harbor to be made battle-ready. Japanese invasion and carrier striking forces left Japanese ports bound for Midway. At the heart of these forces were two divisions of carriers consisting of 2 carriers each. Both Division I aircraft carriers, Akagi and Kaga, and Division II carriers, Hiryu and Soryu, launched the aircraft that bombed Pearl Harbor. To prepare for Midway, these carriers had a complement of technically superior fighters, dive bombers, and torpedo bombers. These were some of the most advanced aircraft in the world, and later became known as Zeros, Vals, and Kates. Japanese pilots and air crews had more than 5 years of combat experience, beginning with Japan's campaign to conquer China. The 4 carriers were supported by an array of battleships, heavy and light cruisers, support ships, and destroyers that surrounded the carriers at the start of the battle. Almost the entire Japanese fleet was dispatched to Midway. An invasion force, close support group, seaplane tender force, transport group, and a shore-based air support group were sent to assume their pre-battle positions. A Japanese occupation force was also deployed to take over Midway Island once the U.S. forces were destroyed. Would the Japanese Armada overpower the U.S. force? U.S. forces steamed across the Pacific from Hawaii toward Midway Island. 2 groups of carriers were deployed to Midway. A total of 3 U.S. carriers were engaged in the battle, 1 carrier fewer than the Japanese. One group was led by the USS Yorktown, an aircraft carrier that came to symbolize the unwavering American spirit. Badly damaged during the Battle of the Coral Sea, Admiral Nimitz ordered that Yorktown return to Pearl Harbor to undergo emergency repairs. Work that should have taken months needed to be rushed. In just 72 hours, Yorktown, with a complement of ship fitters and welders continuing repairs, sailed from Hawaii to confront the enemy at Midway. The other carrier group was composed of USS Enterprise and Hornet. Each carrier in both task forces had a complement of F-4F Wildcat fighters, SBD Dauntless bombers, and TBD Devastator torpedo bombers. The American aircraft were no match for the technically advanced Japanese planes. U.S. planes were slower, heavier, and less maneuverable. Many U.S. pilots had never flown in combat before. Midway would be their first test. Supporting the Yorktown, Enterprise, and Hornet were cruisers, destroyers, and support ships. At the same time on Midway Island, aircraft were prepared to meet the Japanese attack. Would this complement of planes and ships be enough to stop the Imperial Japanese Navy? Would the sheer fighting ability of the U.S. forces equal that of the Japanese? Japan's forces outnumbered the U.S. nearly 2-to-1. Nevertheless, the U.S. complement stood united and dedicated to protect Midway Island. On the morning of June 4th, 1942, the combatants were in position, and the showdown in the Pacific was about to begin in the waters surrounding Midway Island.